Hello, we are going to be reading Jaguar. This is the beginning, before, on page 1. I walked into the den. Pinned up on the wall was a huge map of the Amazon basin in South America. On the floor were stacks of books, scientific journals, and my father, a field biologist named Robert Lanza, Ph.D., also known as Doc, to his friends and his only son. Doc sat in front of a laptop computer, staring intently at the screen. He didn't notice I was there. I was used to this. "What's going on?" I asked. He grunted and didn't look up. "What's with the map and stuff?" "Brazil, field project, preserve, jaguars," he mumbled. When my mom was alive, she called this kind of response Lanza Latin. It had been a while since I had heard this language. My mom's technique for dealing with it was to leave my father alone and to wait for him to snap out of it. I left the room. I went into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Inside was a carton of sour milk, a block of cheddar cheese with splotches of green fuzz colonizing it, and a new item, a half-empty jug of orange juice. My father must have decided to go on a health kick. I grabbed the OJ and rinsed out a cup from the sink, which we were using as a cupboard. Translating my father's mumbling was easy. He was looking at a field project that had something to do with a jaguar preserve in Brazil. The only thing that surprised me about this was the timing. We had only been back in the States for a few months, and the tan I got in Kenya hadn't totally faded yet. We had rented a small house in Poughkeepsie, New York, near my grandfather's retirement home. His name is Taupu, but we called him Taw. He's a Hopi Indian who spent most of his life riveting steel grinders together high above the streets of New York City. The plan was to stay in Poughkeepsie for at least a year while my father wrote up his research notes on the elephants and got them published. It looked as if the plan might change, which was fine with me. Poughkeepsie was an okay city, and I liked the high school I was going to, but after my trip to Kenya, life was a little too tame for my liking. A trip to Brazil would be fantastic. I waited a couple of hours, then went back into the den. My father was on the phone talking to someone. When he saw me, he covered the mouthpiece. "Hey, Jake," he said, "I'm going to be hung up here for a while getting this together. I'll tell you about it when I've figured it out." This was polite Lanza Latin for "get out of the den and don't bother me." I nodded and closed the door. I didn't see my father for several days, but he left signs that he was still alive. I'd get home from school and find human spore-like pizza boxes and coffee grounds on the counter, and every once in a while, I'd hear him talking on the phone behind the closed door. Late on the 4th night, he'd finally emerged from his den. I had just put away my homework and was getting ready to go to bed. "Hey, Jake," he said, "shouldn't you be in school?" "I don't go to night school, Doc." He wandered over to the window and opened the blind. Wow, I really lost track of time. That wasn't all he had lost track of. His long black hair hung down to his shoulders without the benefit of the usual ponytail. He hadn't shaved for a week. I couldn't tell if he had changed his clothes because he always wore jeans and denim shirts. He had at least a dozen sets exactly alike. He turned back from the window. "You still remember Bill Brewster?" "Sure." Bill was one of my father's oldest friends. They had spent a lot of time in the field together, studying animals. I hadn't seen Bill since my mom's funeral. Well, he's in Brazil now, and he's looking for someone to help him set up a jaguar preserve down there. And that someone is you. Right. He paused. "I won't be gone long." I stared at him. He hadn't said that magic word. We. "How long?" He looked away. A bad sign. "Not long. A month. Maybe a little longer." I should have seen this coming. Doc had become increasingly distant over the past few weeks. He'd gone out for long walks by himself and spent hours closed up in his den. Some days, we didn't say more than a dozen words to each other. I thought he was just concentrating on his book about elephants and didn't have time for me. I realize now that it was something else. And what am I supposed to do? I asked. It's not like I'll be gone forever. He had said the same thing when he went to Kenya. I didn't see him for over 2 years. What about my flying lessons? I had just taken my first solo flight. The plan was for me to get my pilot's license by spring so Doc and I could do some cross-country trips this summer. He walked back over to the window and looked outside. Not that there was anything to see. I talked to Pete over at the home, he continued. He said you're welcome to stay there until I get back. You're joking. It's not like it's permanent. I thought we were a team, I reminded him as calmly as I could. Partners. He turned back to me. We are, but you have school. I could take correspondence courses. It's not the same, and I'll only be gone a little while. Doc has made up his mind, and I knew there were no point in arguing with him. He was the most pig-headed man on earth, which is one of the reasons he and my mom had broken up before she died. For some reason, Doc had now suddenly turned into a parent. Our partnership was dissolved. I'll just stay at the house, I said. You're only 14, Jake. You can't stay here by yourself. I was in Kenya by myself. That was different. In this country, there are laws about leaving minors by themselves. I won't tell anybody. Knock it off, Jake. You're going to stay with Tall at the home. Definitely a parent. That isn't fair. I'll only be gone a month, he said. Maybe a little longer.